Welcome to Boiler Wild. My name is Eric Johnson. I am your host, and this is the first episode, June 29th, 2025, date of the recording, first episode of the Boiler Wild podcast. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about just what the Boiler Wild podcast is going to have and what you can expect to talk about on the Boiler Wild podcast. First off, let's start with the name. You might be thinking to yourself, Boiler Wild, that's a pretty wild name. See what I did there? But let me talk about how I came up with the name. Not that it matters too much, but it does actually mean something. So, Boiler Wild, I came up with when I was rucking around my neighborhood at 11 p.m. months ago. But I typically will ruck 3 miles every night, and rucking is essentially walking around with a weighted backpack. So I have a backpack that has 50 pounds in it, and it just helps to elevate your heart rate and overall make walking a more hard experience rather than having to run or having to walk farther. Essentially gets more done faster. I got into rucking a couple years ago, but besides the point, I try to ruck consistently, and it takes about a little over an hour to get my normal route done. And obviously, I have a lot of time to think about stuff during that time, and I typically do it at night. So I have the whole day to think about, what I did and reflect on what I did on the day and then think about the next day. So it leads to a lot of thinking, and I've been wanting to start a podcast for a while now. I've had people ask me if I'm going to start a podcast. Not that I've done anything notable or that I'm anybody special. It's just something that I've just kind of wanted to do, and there's no better time than now. A lot of people, I think, to start a podcast, they think they have to have done something notable or noteworthy in their life, like, oh, I, run a company that's worth $20 million, or, I slept in my car and now I'm worth $100 million, and all this crazy stuff that you see out on the internet and other people's podcasts. But really it just comes from talking about your experiences. That's what make interesting podcasts, is your experiences, other people's experiences, and just having real conversations. And you can just expect that on this podcast. All I have really are my experiences, what I read, what I see, what I've lived. And those experiences, while I'm not an expert, that, speaks with authority on tons of topics, I can speak from experience. Everybody has different experiences, and if you've lived in experiences, that's your truth. And that means something, and other people live similar experiences and can learn from it. So I think there is some value to that, and I think there is this kind of sentiment on the internet that you have to be an expert in order to talk about something or to even start something. So there's a lot of, I see this, it's almost like you have to be an expert to be a beginner, which doesn't make sense. But, people want to see your credentials and, see that you worked 20 years in an industry or, did something. They want to see, like, why should I listen to you? And that is valid if you're giving an opinion or, something on a topic that, carries some weight. But if you're just talking about, hey, this is my experience, this is what I learned, do this, I learned not to do this, then that is something that could be true for everybody. And you don't need 20 years of experience and to build a $50 million company or, to be a celebrity to talk about that. There are everyday people like me and you can talk about their experiences and learn from each other's experiences. So anyways, back to the name Boiler Wild. So if you don't already know, my name is Eric Johnson, and I am the founder and CEO of Boilearn. I'll spell that out, Boilearn. It's a combination of boiler and learning words together, and Boilearn is a boiler training company with a mission to drive continuous learning and improvement in the boiler industry. Essentially, we help people up their skills and just try to solve the lack of training and lack of learning options in the boiler industry. I'll get into that later, but that's what I do. So essentially, all my professional career, the short time I've been working professionally, it's all been in the boiler industry. I've been a service tech previously before in the role that I've not been now. So all I know is boilers and boiler systems. I do have a degree in HVAC engineering technology. So I am familiar with HVACR as a whole, been through refrigeration classes, superheat, subcooling, all that stuff. But professionally working as a career, boilers, burners, process, heating, combustion, steam, hydronics, thermal fluid, all that fun stuff. Since I'm in the boiler industry, I love boilers, love talking about boilers and boiler related stuff. That's where the boiler part comes in. This is going to be a boiler focused podcast. So you can expect technical stuff about boilers, a little bit more in depth about, what a boiler is, steam systems, past stories I have, past experiences I have from just days where I thought the day would never end, or, just where things went very wrong. So there's a lot to be learned there. And as you know, if you've ever been working in the boiler room or operating a boiler, you probably have some wild experiences. So I have plenty of those. And so boiler focused podcast, but on the opposite side of that is, even though, you work on boilers, or you're just a service tech, just an operator, or even in sales, company leadership, something like that, I'm big about personal development and improvement, and, what that looks like to be a good human being and to just essentially grow personally beyond what like an average person would do, which is just kind of float down the river and life takes them where life does. And, then they get old in their 50s, 60s, and they wonder why life never turned out for them. So that's where WILD comes from. WILD is an acronym that I came up with. It stands for work hard, invest in yourself, lead others, and develop into a person of excellence. That's basically what I thought were important for a person to grow. Working hard, sometimes a lot of people think working hard is, digging ditches and turning wrenches and all that stuff. Yes, it can be manual labor, but some of the hardest days I've worked are the ones that were mentally challenging, and I was continually solving problem after problem, and a lot of those problems I'd never solved before. So it's thinking through, looking at the variables, and figuring out what is going on and how do I get to the desired outcome of that problem. And those are the days where you drive home with no music, you're staring at the road, and you're like, what is even going on? Your mind is like mush, and you get home, you sit down on the couch, and it seems like you are just so tired. I've been there many days, many days. And that is what hard work is for me. So hard work is more than physical, but it is just this push to be better mentally and physically. And I'll get into that later and kind of what that looks like in certain situations. So then the I is investing in yourself. So I think a lot of people don't invest in themselves. I'm a big believer that the best thing you can do is invest in yourself. Education is an investment in yourself. The things you learn, nobody can take away from you. So if you go to college, if you go to trade school, vocational school, where you get training through, professional training, like through a union or manufacturer training or anything like that, a formal apprenticeship, that is investing in yourself. You are learning a skill, and in this case, you are learning a trade that you take with you. Nobody can take the knowledge you learned away from you. So you make yourself more valuable as a human being if you can solve more problems in this capitalist economy that we work in America. And outside of professional development, you need to invest in yourself with personal development. So what does that look like? That is going to the gym. That is eating right. That is doing all the things that you know you should be doing, but are not. And, maybe that's not drinking alcohol every night of the week, or even cutting out alcohol of your life. Like there's so much to invest in yourself. Like, what do you see yourself being as a future self in 10 years? And then you got to invest in yourself to be that. Leading others is the L. So not everybody is in a leadership formal position, but we all lead people. So if you work in a boiler room and you work with a crew of 3 other people, you lead them. They lead you, you lead them. Even if you are a formal leader, the people under you also will lead you. And you're like, well, how does that make sense? So you tell them what to do, and then they say, hey, boss, like, I understand like why you're saying that, but have you thought about like this? And, sometimes, they just need to do what you tell them, but they're leading you for you to be a better boss, and you are leading them so that they can be better workers that work with you. So it's a give and take relationship. It's not a one-way street of leader tells worker and worker never tells or learns, or the leader never learns anything from the worker. So even if you're not in leadership, you are leading others, and it's important to just be a shining light of what is important to lead others, especially if you want to do things correctly and have a standard for yourself. And if a bunch of people get together and if you just have no leadership, then we've all been in those situations where it just kind of goes everybody for themselves and nothing happens. So I will get into that more later, and how that looks. And personally, I don't have tons of leadership experience. That is definitely something I need to work on more. But, I'm also decently young, and, I think most leaders need to work more on leadership. It is one of the hardest skills to develop. And with that, we'll go into the last. The D means develop, and that is develop yourself into a person of excellence. So you want to work hard, invest in yourself, lead others, which leads to developing yourself into a person of excellence, which essentially, what is a person of excellence? Essentially, you do everything to the best of your abilities, and you develop a life that ends up being the life that you want. And that looks different for everybody. Your life is different than my life, and how I want to live my life is different than how you want to live your life. And there really is no correct answer as long as you fit within some boundaries. There's the typical like moral and legalistic boundaries, but if I want to, be a boiler service technician for the rest of my career, and you want to be a mechanical engineer for the rest of your career, I'm not right and you're not right. There's no right and wrong in that, but it would do us both good to develop ourselves into people of excellence. So I would want to be an excellent boiler service technician, and you would want to be an excellent mechanical engineer. And we'll go over later on different ways to do that. Just developing excellence for yourself. And like I said, I'm decently young, 31 at this time, and I may seem preachy on this podcast. I may have some wild takes, but a lot of that is just me preaching to my current self, my past self, and my future self. I have lived a decent amount of experiences, and just being able to process those and communicate those is something that I want to work on with this podcast. If you are expecting high production quality podcasts, this is not the podcast. If you want real and raw experiences, this is for you. So that is where the name comes from, Boiler Wild. I like it, and let me know if you like it. If you don't like it, keep your opinion to yourself then. So, like I said, episode 1, kicking it off, and going to try to post an episode every single day for at least 30 days, but expect in-depth boiler knowledge, some stories, what I'm doing with Boilearn, and how we're trying to change the training and development space in the boiler industry, and just other things about personal development and being a good employee in a company that you work in, or a boss, or a founder for your own company. So that's what it is. Hope you like it. If you like this episode, even though it's just an intro episode, please rate the podcast 5 stars. Really appreciate it. And if you get anything out of future episodes, please tell somebody, share it, so that we can grow this. And eventually, once I get a decent amount of listeners that it's worth somebody else's time to come on the podcast, I'll start bringing some guests on the podcast, as the boiler industry is full of knowledgeable people that have been around the world or been around the sun. Full of knowledgeable people that have been around the sun way many more times than me, and they have way more experience and things I can learn from and you can learn from as well. So if you are interested in being on the podcast, you can email me, contact me. You can contact me if we're on LinkedIn. Also, you can send me an email at eric.johnson@boilearn.com. And I'll spell that again, BOILEARN. And just state your name, what you do, and that you listen to this episode and are interested in being a host. I don't know when that'll be when I bring people on, but I want there to be enough listeners if this podcast ever gets there to make it worth your while. I don't want you to be a guest on a podcast with 20 listeners. So that's all for today. Let's stay wild.